Hello, Robbie. I'm delighted to be welcoming Robbie to the chat room today. Robbie Steinhouse, lovely to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining us. You are presenting at the NLP conference next May.
Yeah,
And your topic, I think, is one that would be of great interest to all NLP professionals, which is how to build a sustainable business with NLP. So for starters, do tell us a little bit more about yourself and your presentation.
great. Well, in terms of the presentation, I think the word sustainable is a little bit ambiguous because there's something of sustainable sometimes can be considered financially sustainable. So can the thing wash its face and give you a living? But then there's also the sort of sustainable more on the NLP logical levels. Is it ethically sustainable? Is it also politically sustainable? We are living in uncertain times. It wouldn't be a good idea to go into manufacturing cameras or something now, I guess. So there is also that sort of aspect of sustainability. So it's a kind of an interesting area. But to
Yeah,
me, the word sustainable means that, it'll keep you and keep you going. It's not something which will just sort of like fade away, but there is also that kind of interesting ambiguity there. I mean, building a business kind of goes into my past a bit, which I'll touch on in a moment. But the with NLP, I mean, means using is again ambiguous. Hopefully, nicely so. Could it be that you're building a business, doing something with NLP, or are using NLP in any business that you like?
yes.
So I'm going to sort of keep that as a little bit of a surprise, but I think that there is this, this ambiguity, which is interesting.
I do like an ambiguity.
Yeah, I mean, I think basically, again, it's both. You could build, like I've got an NLP business called NLP School where I teach practitioner and then various other things.
Yeah.
And that's definitely building a sustainable business with NLP, but that's a bit too much on the lid. But if you were doing something like, I don't know, you had a pizza delivery business, I mean, you could still use NLP principles in the way that you ran it. So, yeah. I don't know why pizza delivery is not. I mean, that sounds sustainable, doesn't it? It sounds like.
It sounds tasty anyway.
And how to do it? Well, my first book I published in 2008 with Chris West, and Chris and I wrote this together. I was very impressed with his book, The Beer Mat Entrepreneur, and it sort of maps, in some sense, my own story, where in 2000 and no, it wasn't 2000, that was 1987, as I was unemployed and I thought I needed money and some kind of status in society, I should do something. So I set up my own little business in my bedroom and then just kind of grew it from there. Moved from the bedroom to the living room, and then the world was my oyster.
Took over the whole house.
But it wasn't an NLP related business. It was a business related to property and insurance and things like that. Anyway, that grew into a reasonably large business. So when I came to NLP in about over 20 years ago, at that point I was a sort of stressed out entrepreneur who had various fingers in various pies and knew that my mental health was unwinding, and it was my coach who introduced me to NLP. And I liked it so much, I, took over the business in a sense, as the old shaving advert used to go. Do you remember that one?
Yes.
It shows my age. Anyway, so for then 20 years, I kind of ran my sort of traditional business that I started and also taught NLP. So I like to think that I'm somebody who's not only used NLP or teach NLP, but I've also been a supplier and a user. I know that's, again, unfortunately ambiguous, but kind of hopefully it's tricky. So in other words, a lot of people who, in NLP will sort of preach NLP, but they've never actually used it. I actually paid for coaches and NLP professionals and so on to come into the business to coach me and to coach my team to grow the business, and it worked.
Yes.
So I think I'm still talking a lot about your first question, but how to build a business is the theme of my first book and also of this talk.
Wonderful, and as you said, beautifully ambiguous. So curiosity will get the better of us, and we'll turn up. So what will delegates take away from your session apart from ambiguity?
Well, yeah, I suppose the how to build a business is. I'd like delegates. I'd say would be at different phases of their careers in this. So some of them might be in the startup phase. Some of them might have an existing business and they want to grow it. Some people might be sort of building a side hustle and have a job. It could be somebody who has a medium-sized business who wants to grow into a large business. So I'd like to say that there is a kind of a metaphor of just like the acorn to the sort of sapling to the seedling, or probably seedling and sapling, and then mighty oak, which actually came over as Chris West's metaphor. And I kind of like the idea that I'm hoping that for different phases of business I can help. But one of the things that I would hope would be a tight takeaway would be some kind of practical ideas of how you would use NLP in organizing yourself to move into what is called popular in business, the concept of doing stuff which is important but not urgent. A kind of idea from Stephen Covey.
Yes.
So how do you do that? How, we're all running to keep still in a way between our busy lives and all the rest of it. If you're going to build a business, it means you've got to do more than just cope with what's coming in. And there's an element of time management, but also using the logical levels in a model I created to set up a sort of weekly planning template, and I think that's really the art of it, is how can you use sort of a time management methodology, task management, but also combine that with NLP to move forward. And I have a model which I created and I'll share. And also the sort of business plan, simple business plan. Sometimes people forget that. Sometimes people start a business and then 10 years later think, oh, I can never make a living at this. Maybe it would have been a good idea to have thought about that at the beginning. Even it might take just 5 minutes, but actually to see, again, sustainable. And also exploring some of those limiting beliefs. I mean, I suppose, I saw something, I think, on Instagram today, a picture of, what do you do? So you ask an entrepreneur, what do you do? But you do everything. But that means that you become pretty good at everything. I mean, not fantastic, but you're good at sales, good at finance, good at planning, good at operations. And so often people who move from, say, a large role or a corporate role will have some kind of limiting beliefs around one of those areas, like maths are boring or impossible, or salespeople are sleazy or bad, or something like that. And it's unpacking those beliefs, which also will be part of the takeaway, which hopefully means that somebody will walk away feeling energized, empowered, and not caught up by some limitation.
Wonderful. I think that whole thing about sustainable business as well, you've touched on so many things from the perspective of it sounds very simple when you're in that big corporate, and I know we've been talking recently about a particular business that we've been involved in, and it's having that business understanding of all those things, like you said, because they don't just happen. And it could be the best. I can't think of a particular. You can be the best career person in the world, but taking that career that you're particularly good at and turning it into a business, the two very different things, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think I also hold a belief, which I think I will sort of cover as well, a little bit through my my latest book, which I think I covered a bit more last year on the conference, is the idea of business archetypes in a way, what are the sort of energies in that. And I take the belief that anyone can succeed at business. I don't think that you have to be like a very bombastic character, or a very kind of super organized sort of kind of boffin type character. I think it's just a matter that we're all different, and that means we're going to bring strengths and weaknesses to the table, and how do you manage to navigate that so it still works out. No one is perfect at business. Everyone has got their cross to bear in a way, is my view. And I think fundamentally there's also this thing about sort of observability, which is also can be interesting, because of there's also sometimes beliefs around money and stuff like that, and how we're raised with that, so that's also interesting.
Yes, absolutely. There's so much involved. So it's exciting times. So is there anything that delegates can do beforehand to get a deeper experience from your session?
Well, I obviously wouldn't want to, but this is the opportunity for me not to sell things, isn't it, in a way? Because obviously I'd say I do have sort of products that people could look at. I mean, but that's up to them. It's all on our website. But I mean, I think that there is this kind of interesting thing where somebody says the statement, I can't do something, like I can't sell or I can't do finance. And then you ask them the question, well, have you ever read a book on sales or finance? And they say no. And you say, well, that's interesting. So, I mean, I think the thing is, I would sort of say, be honest with yourself. What is the thing that you're not doing? and be curious. Maybe just look at it, from the logical levels as a capability rather than a belief about a capability. If you're doing nothing to improve that capability, maybe start off at the capability level by, finding out a bit more, doing a bit more about it. And being curious about that particular area. I mean, in sales, there's a great line which you're probably familiar with, which is close and shut up.
I wasn't familiar with that.
No, it's a good one. Well, basically, the idea is sometimes salespeople keep talking, but I think that's also a good tip for a coach, isn't it? Sometimes you're best to say, "So, what do you think?" and then keep quiet.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in many ways, there's also this idea that if you want to build an NLP business, I think business in itself can be a positive skill as a coach or as a trainer, using some of those ideas of when silence is important. So I think actually the term is sell and shut up. It's not a very polite term, is it? But it's but it makes its point, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Business way.
Brilliant. So, Robbie, we've known each other a while, and we've met at many conferences, and you've been a delegate and a presenter at our conferences. So, what does the NLP International Conference mean to you?
Well, I mean, to me, I think it's a wonderful experience for me to come. I mean, I think as I started, I felt like the new boy at school when I first came to the conference, Regent's College, where I did the training. I remember sitting around when I first became a presenter and meeting Shelley Rose Jarve for the first time, who since became friends, and other people who I've met and so on and got to know better. So I think it's a great opportunity to enter it's a kind of I'd say the world-class event for NLP, to meet the NLP people in the world and connect with them and get to see what latest ideas there are out there, because it just seems to me to be the wonderful thing about NLP, this huge sort of flurry of creativity and kind of global creativity. The other thing which is nice for me is to see some of the people who I've actually taught. I mean, I've been teaching trainer training for 10 years now at NLPU. So some of the people who are presenting were my students. So I sort of feel I've moved from being the new boy to being, well, not quite the old boy, but...
You can be the father. You're not the grandfather yet. It's fine. Oh, thank you so much, Robbie. For those of you watching, as I said, Robbie Steinhouse is presenting at the NLP conference next year. The topic is how to build a sustainable business with NLP, beautifully ambiguous. And Robbie is presenting on Sunday, the 21st of May, nice and early at 9 o'clock. And it's a 3-hour presentation. So there'll be a half-hour gap in the middle or breaks wherever, but 3 hours to be able to really get a deep dive into this particular presentation. So looking forward to seeing you next year, Robbie. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Karen. I much appreciate it. And thanks for all the work you do.